Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to be painting a Space Wolf converted by the amazing Valbjorn. Now I'm probably going to have the title of this video as something hyperbolic like the best Space Wolves ever, but I kind of believe that, to be honest. So Valbjorn has trusted me to paint this amazing conversion of his, and I think what makes them so special is how fine the details are. Now I think these are the best Space Wolf conversions I've seen because these details that he adds, they're just so fine you can't actually do them with plastic. So, I don't expect Games Workshop to make models like this because they just can't produce them. I think if you take the Games Workshop models and then add your extra fine details on them, it really adds a better sense of scale, and this is something you can try yourself. I would really recommend checking out Valbjorn's Patreon. Recently I've been trying to improve my sculpting a lot, and I'm slowly getting better, and the tips and following along things from his videos has been super invaluable for me, and I've just been getting better at working with the materials. But yeah, honestly, if you like what you see here, he's got awesome videos, so I really recommend checking out his Patreon. That's my plug. So, looking at the mini, he's sculpted me, and yes, it is daunting. I can't mess it up. I often make mistakes on my models, maybe strip the paint, and I know I can't really do that on here because the details are so fine, especially things like the hair, but that's what makes it so good, having that hair, with a real sense of scale, really fine and how it should be, not big chunky bits. And I absolutely love the parts that he sculpted with metal. Honestly, I don't know, I really don't want to paint it because it's so nice to look at all the different materials that he's used and just see where he's added the work. But, these models do need to be painted. I started by sculpting my own base with some milliput, and I chose a nice sort of raggedy piece of wood because I thought it would look nice and traditional with this figure, and I wanted just some basic rock formations. I didn't want to do an elaborate base. I just wanted a simple kind of plain rock with snow look that you kind of see in the artworks, and of course the Space Wolf artworks are really what inspires me to do these guys. I looked at all the Space Wolf artworks to decide on my colour palette, and I thought this one from this old codex was my favourite. So it's kind of a dark grey. There isn't any yellow on the shoulder pads. They have red, and they have this bone-coloured pad as well. And I did my research just to double check, and these are called the Sons of Morkai. So I needed to go on eBay and grab myself some of these old decals to get this decal, but I really wanted to do this colour scheme, and I thought I'll try and stay loyal to that and make sure it's in keeping with the fluff. After I'd finished the base, I removed the model and I pinned it to a cork so I could paint the figure on its own, and I could easily add it into the base later. I made sure that it fitted really nicely. For priming, I didn't want to obscure any of the really fine details, so I'm using Mr. Hobby Surfacer, and you use this with the airbrush, and it's an incredible primer. The only reason I don't use it for every single model is because it is stinky, and I just can't be bothered with putting my mask on and cleaning it up, but it is worth it, and for a model as important as this, it was definitely worth the extra time priming. Honestly, when I was priming this, I felt like I was committing a crime. It just seemed so bad to cover up all this amazing detail, but like I said, it's tempting to just keep hold of these models and look at all the amazing green stuff work, but they should be painted and finished. And I was speaking to Valbjorn, and I think that nobody has painted any of his conversions yet. I know a few people have them, but I'm not sure anyone has finished a miniature yet. So if that's true, then it'll be nice to be the first one to actually paint one of these. So the grey I started with was Skaven Blight Dinge from Citadel, and I'm not going to be doing any airbrushing on this figure really. I just want to prime it in this dark grey. I'm sure you can get a spray can from some other brands if you wanted, but I think given how fine this model is, then I needed to again airbrush this base coat. But I'm going to do all the highlighting, everything with the brush, but I just thought getting a nice smooth coat of grey would be great. And also double check that it's the right tone that I'm after. And luckily for me, it's one of those where it actually went right, and I really like the colour of this grey. I think it's pretty much spot on for what I was looking for. I did also spray the face with some white because I really like painting skin from a light base coat. I don't like working up from dark when it comes to faces. I also wanted to light the figure from one side, so I thought it would be good to spray white over, one side of it where I wanted the light to come from. But I think this was a mistake, or not a mistake, but it was a little bit of a waste of time. I just didn't need to do it. I could have easily worked up from my Skaven Blight Dinge base coat and it would have been fine. I really wanted the white on the face, and I just thought maybe this would work. So I ended up airbrushing the Skaven Blight Dinge over the white areas. And yeah, it didn't make anything bad in the end, but I just think this was a step I didn't need to do. I felt a little bit rusty, so I was going to do the face, but I felt like doing a little bit of a warm-up, and I just started blocking in some areas black. For context, this is the first model I've painted since Golden Demon in Spiel, and I got pretty burnt out at the end of painting this project. It had loads of problems, things went wrong. Of course, the deadline, the pressure of Golden Demon, and I just felt pretty wiped out when I came back to my painting desk. And I tried painting a few things and it just didn't work. But then I collected this from Valbjorn at Monte Santovino show, and I knew this was the right project for me. I'm going to paint it as well as I can, but in what I would call my personal, grimdark kind of style. It's how I like to paint my Heresy miniatures, like my Sons of Horus, and I'll just be focusing on, lots of battle damage and more subtle details than how I painted something like Fuegan, where it's all shiny and bold colours. I just want to paint something more subtle, and I want to relax. I don't want to have every detail be perfect and be worrying about people online criticising my edge highlights, which is absolutely hilarious. I just want it to look kind of gritty and like these codex covers, and these don't have super neat perfect edge highlights. They're like this. So the first thing I do for the face is I take any kind of skin color. It's not going to matter too much. You could take some Cadian flesh. I'm using one called Natural Flesh from Vallejo, and mix in a reddy brown, so something like Cavalry Brown again from Vallejo, and you're going to dilute this into a wash and just wash it all over the face. This is going to help find the eyes, the details, the recesses, but you're kind of not committing to anything yet. I also take a thicker version of this mix that I've made, and I painted it on one side of the face. This will be the shadows. I don't want the skin to be too vibrant, so normally I would maybe use something like an ice yellow to get the skin really drawing attention, but with this I want it to be kind of desaturated colours and grizzly, and so I used actually a grey blue, and I think that will help fit it into the cold snowy environment. So I start by blocking in my base colour. In this case it's Natural Flesh, and the wash has shown me where all the details are, so I just block around those and just pick out the details. Then for the highlights I'll start adding in that pale grey blue, and this you'll see up to a point it will just take away a little bit of the colour out of the skin, but eventually it will look a little bit too grey, a little bit too blue, so you might want to start adding in some white or something like that. A lot of the time people say don't add white for your highlights, but the reason for this is because it will desaturate the colour very quickly. But in this case I am looking for a skin that isn't rich with loads of colour in, so absolutely is going to work. I really push the highlights bright at the top of the head because I'm going to have this light that all comes from one side, and one side of the face will be very dark in the shadow, but I need to just push the top corner of this forehead to have a nice light spot on it. I more or less finished the face. I thought I could come back and tweak it, but the next thing I wanted to do was block in everything just to get a feel of the color scheme. I think I had the right grey, but I needed to check that I had the right red that I wanted and how it looked against everything else, and also the off-white bone kind of colour for the shoulder pad. I just think it's nice to have all the colours locked in, and then you can chip away and finish all the details however you want. For the browns, I used a lot of the mini colour ones, so thanks to anyone that has backed these. You'll notice when I'm painting this figure, I'm not using loads of them, and that's because I know you can't get them yet, so that's why I wanted to use some colours you can get, but there's a few things that I really want to use them for. I think the browns and the reds are, I think, maybe the best thing that we do. Not that the others are bad, everything's great, but I really think the browns and the reds are absolutely top tier. So I probably won't use any other reds from another brand for a while now. I am using this rock grey from AK for the off-white shoulder pad. And this was another one like the dark grey armour where I thought, maybe that'll work, and it was absolutely perfect. And this doesn't happen all the time. I often paint things 3 or 4 times and can't find the right colour, but I was lucky with this one, and yeah, I really like this paint. It was fantastic to use. You'll notice with the base coat, I'm doing kind of a chunky stippling motion, and that's because I'm not worried about getting a perfectly even finish on this. I want it to have some visual noise, a little bit of feeling, and yeah, so having a perfect base coat isn't really necessary here. Having it a little bit patchy is going to look fine, especially as we add highlights, shadows, battle damage. It will just become part of the visual noise that we're going to create. I started base coating the shoulder pad in the brightest red that we do. It's chili. It's the one that I've been using absolutely all the time, especially on models like my Fuegan. But I felt this isn't the right thing here. I don't want a super vibrant red for this. It needs to be something more somber to fit the feeling that I'm going for. So I actually used our darkest red, which is Sangria. You can see I tested it out on the belt first of all, and yeah, it's just a lot darker, and I think that's the one to go for. This is why I love base coating everything at this point. You get a real good idea about how the color scheme is going to work overall, and you can also get over some of the, the messy parts where you might get something on your nice grey armor or something like that. So, and for me, it was really good because I wasn't feeling rusty, but yeah, I just wasn't ready for perfect painting at this point. I was still kind of getting myself back into it, I must admit. When it comes to creating tutorials, I think it's nice to finish a part, show how you've done it, and then you move on, but that's not how I paint naturally. I'll rotate around a little bit, and you can see I'm going back to the shoulder pad now, building up another layer in that kind of rough stippling motion again. And this is more really how I paint. I tend to flip-flop around some parts, working on some, trying to resolve some areas as I go, but I was kind of just experimenting and trying things out. You can even see I tried adding some highlights to the armor, but the color I tried didn't work, so that's why it's good to experiment. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about the more natural way that I paint, and also when I'm blocking in and base coating these details, I kind of discover and think about, well, what do I want to work on next? I want to do metallics with this model. It's going to fit the style better, and I've been absolutely loving Pro Acryl Bronze recently. You'll probably notice that I don't use Pro Acryl paints, but I do like the metallics quite a lot, and I think this bronze is particularly nice. I used it on a model recently, and super smooth. It's the right tone. I don't want a really flashy gold. So yeah, just blocking in some nice base coats with this early doors is quite nice to see that kind of shiny metallic against all the matte areas. Any parts that were leather, I base coated with US Field Drab from Model Color, and then I gave this a wash with Scale Artist Burnt Umber. If you've watched my videos, especially on our Patreon, I probably use this paint on every single model. It's just a really versatile cold dark brown, and it dilutes really well, so it won't split even when you add a lot of water. And I absolutely love the finish. The way it dries just looks like leather, so I like to use it for these parts all the time. But yeah, it's quite nice to just get a light base coat down, put a couple of heavy washes on, and that just gives you a good head start. And I can see where I'm going, and I can do some refined detail over the top later. You'll also notice I don't tend to use washes, but I do a lot of washes. So I don't feel like I need to use a wash product. I'm absolutely more than happy to just dilute a regular paint. But some paints dilute and work in this way a lot better, and this Scale Artist paint is one of these. But the reason I use it over a wash is the finish. The way it dries is so much nicer to look at than something like a Citadel wash. So that's why I work in this way. I decided to finish the hair, and I used one of our mini color browns. You could use something like Mornfang brown. This is just maybe a little bit richer than that, but basically any kind of orange-ish brown. That's the kind of color I want to go for, but I don't want it to be really orange, just a warm brown to go against all the cold greys that I have around it. I then added some Talon sand and a little bit of ivory to get it lighter, and I focus on building the light to match the highlight that I put on the forehead. Most of the hair is going to be dark, but I want this one side to be really light. Like I said, when you see the end result, you'll see I'm going to have all this light on one side of the figure, and the other side will be really dark, and hopefully it looks quite dramatic in the final photos. Now I have the hair done, I want to start ticking off some details, and I just chose the shoulder pad for no reason other than I kind of wanted to work top down, but I also wanted to get the grey armour done because that's the biggest area. So I added a little bit of my grey base colour, the Skavenblight Dinge, into that rock grey, and you don't need a lot to darken it, so just be careful. But then I just painted some darker shadows around one side, and if I made a mistake, it was quite easy to build up with that stipple texture with the rock grey, and it's just way more forgiving when you're painting with, you know, not trying to be super smooth. So if you do an area that looks a bit rough, that you've made it too dark, just stippling over the top with your base color, it hides it pretty quickly. I thought I'd better tackle the main element now, which is of course the dark grey armor. And I tried adding a blue grey into it, actually the same one I used for the skin, because I thought that would bring some harmony, but it just wasn't making the grey that I wanted. I tried out this sea grey from Vallejo Model Color again, and I'm gradually trying to sort of work out if I like the new ones, because the old range was my favourite paint range, and the jury's still out on the new one, but so far it's pretty good. And yeah, this was the perfect grey for sure. It just had the right amount of warmth, and it wasn't too light either. I knew if I went all the way to this on its own, it wasn't going to be overpowering. The most important thing when building up these highlights is the direction of your brush stroke. So you can see I'm always going away from the shadow, doing some big brush strokes, and then I do a bunch of small ones to kind of be more precise and get the line exactly where I want. But again, this is going to have some rough texture, it's going to have lots of little dots and lines, and this is more forgiving. I want it to have that looser style that feels a little less sterile and closer resembles the artworks that inspire me so much. So we need to continue to build these highlights, especially on this side. So the other leg doesn't need this highlight because I'm only pushing this one side lighter. So I add a bit more of that sea grey in. So it probably takes me 2 or 3 mixes to build up from the Skavenblight up to the sea grey on its own. And I just need to, gradually layer it, getting a little bit smaller each time. And again, I pay attention to the direction of my brush stroke, just always going away from that shadow. And we're not going to concentrate on getting perfect blending, not like, as best I can, but I want it to be good. I want it to be a nice, happy medium where I don't go insane and I enjoy myself, but it still looks refined. And I think that's the balance. I think after painting a Golden Demon project where you worry about every little mistake is gonna, cost you something, then I just needed to paint in a way that felt more relaxing, but you still need to be satisfied with the end results. I tried doing some speed painting, and I didn't like that at all. I didn't like really rushing, and I didn't want to paint where I'm being so anal about every little detail that I go nuts. So I think it's this happy medium where you paint a figure that you're happy with the end result. That's the groove I got into when painting this figure, and I really, really enjoyed it. You'll notice when I'm building up these highlights, I'm not really focusing on edge highlighting. I will chuck a few in here and there, but I'm probably going to weather a lot of the edge highlights. So they'll have some chipping where the paint will have worn away on the corners. But you do want some edge highlights, and as I build up the lighter layers, I do make sure I put them in there. I think it's just important I don't have really bright, super sharp edge highlights on every single edge, because it will take away from the atmosphere that I'm trying to create here. So at this point, I'm up to the sea grey on its own, and the good thing about the way I'm painting this figure is I don't need to render every part of the armor in this way. It is just this light side, and basically, the only big area is this leg. I have to do the arm and some parts on the chest and the backpack, but there's not a lot of the figure that I need to render like this, and this is what takes the time, building up these layers and doing it on every part of the marine. That would be quite time consuming, but I found this project reasonably quick considering. I started to really push the light by adding some ivory, and with this I was very sparing. So instead of painting the entire volume of the leg, especially the shin, I just did the very top of the knee where the angle changes direction, and this is getting closer towards facing my light more directly. So I had to do the thigh plate, but not the shin. So it's just, the top of the thigh and a little corner of the knee where it creeps in. And I also have to get the collar here, and you can see that highlight is going to match the angle of the highlight I've put on the head and the forehead and everything. I think once you get all these bright highlights to line up and they're consistent throughout the entire mini across all the different details, then it can look pretty magical. And this is definitely an illustration kind of look. Again, just going back to what inspires me. I tilted the model upside down just to make it more comfortable, and again my brush stroke is going towards that edge, and even when I'm doing a really small area like this, I've switched down to a more detailed brush and just pushing a little more ivory until I'm happy with the amount of light. I'm not looking for a shiny, non-metallic look here. It's just, what would a grey matte surface look like with a lot of light on it. And I think it might get to a point where I could push it too far, but I need to find that point. So I just keep pushing the light. But I think this is it. I think this is enough, and it's working for me. Once I've done that, I flip it, and I think that's looking pretty good. And I just go back with some of the previous colors. So I just use the sea grey on its own now without the ivory. And my brush stroke is going to go away from the highlights this time. And I do some blending. This is basically how I do my blending technique. Push the brush strokes towards the light and then go in reverse. But I'm not going to go nuts. I'm just going to do a few brush strokes to try and soften and diffuse these highlights. But because I was quite careful in the layering process, they don't need a lot of refinement at this point. Just a little bit of a tweak. And I'm starting to get happier with this model and see where it's going. But I really like the grey. It's a boring grey, it's not a bright blue or anything like that, but this is more or less what I had in my head. I start to work on the other leg, and this is going to be rendered as well, but it's just not going to go anywhere near as bright, so it doesn't even go up to the dark sea grey, and I think I need to make it a little bit darker as well, maybe by adding some black into the Skaven Blight Dinge, but at this point I'm just doing some glazing with the Skaven Blight Dinge just to soften those highlights that I did earlier, and I can make a judgment call if I need to go darker after that. So yeah, I do some glazing, some blending, but just a few passes. I'm not going to do, 20 passes of glazing to get it absolutely perfect on this one. But to be honest, I'm really happy and I'm really enjoying it. So that's all that matters, I guess. I moved on to the red shoulder pad and I tried to paint some white in like a big highlight and thought that I could just paint red over the top of that. But it didn't quite work, so I ended up covering this up and just building up the red with a lighter red in a kind of traditional way. I actually came to the end of my painting session when I thought, that red's not working, I'll come back to it. But I thought, I'll get the decals on, they can dry overnight, and I can come back to it tomorrow. Annoyingly, I used decals all from the same sheet, and the one on the shoulder worked absolutely perfectly, but the others, they seemed to go wrong, so I made sure I chipped them before varnishing them over the top, just getting a few scratches in there. But it looks really great having this black decal breaking up the plain white shoulder pad right now. And after chipping the decals, I painted on some ultra matte varnish, and this really helps hide the decals. I don't want the ultra matte finish particularly on this model, but it just makes the decals really disappear, as well as using the microsol. I wanted to paint the gem in the center turquoise. Be nice to have some vibrant color on here. And I base coated with a kind of mid-tone turquoise. And then I added in some shading. I'm using the mini color ones, but you could use Despair Green from Scale. This is a super deep dark turquoise, and you can glaze that on to get really rich and dark shadows. But I definitely think for this turquoise, starting with your middle color, then shading it down, and then you add your brighter highlights just sharp around the edges of the gem at the end. That's the way to go for sure. I had this gem in the center, and I thought it would be cool to balance the model by adding a little bit of verdigris. So I tried adding a little blue wash into these bronze details, and I thought that would balance the amount of blue around the model nicely. The teeth and bone details I painted very simply. I base coated with the field drab, and then I gave it the wash. So I reapplied the field drab as a first highlight, and then I just added some Yashabti bone for the highlights. So really nice and simple in terms of the method. I just took my time to do this neatly, smoothly, and just get a nice gradient on the bones. And this looks really good because, they have this nice angle change at the end. So I just picked out the very ends with the Yashabti, and I think it just highlighted these super fine details. For the red, I am using mini color pomegranate, which is probably the red I've used the least. And this is a high covering red, so the others are really vibrant, and this one is still vibrant, but it just covers a little bit better, and I think this was the right tone for what I was going for here. So I just built that up, and then I added a little bit of some ivory for some bright spot highlights just to match the intensity of the hair. But just really simple, just layered up some highlights on that red. The leather parts, I pretty much did the same as the bone, but I didn't add in any Yashabti. I darkened it down way further by adding more washes with the burnt umber, and then I built up by taking some of that burnt umber and actually mixing it in with the field drab just to darken it down. But then I did build that up, and the final highlight was the field drab on its own. So basically using the same paints but in a different way, and I just love using that burnt umber. I worked on the bear claw, and this was quite hard to paint as fine as it's sculpted, so the sculpting is so fine on it, I struggled to get my details on here. And I just painted this pretty much the same way I did the mane hair, to be honest, but I didn't go as light, and I washed it back down as well. I painted the claws black because I thought that this would look nicer against the hand underneath it, and I just used the colours I really had on the palette. So I used the dark sea grey I used for the grey armour, and I used some Yashabti bone to do some little spots and bright highlights at the top of the claws. I like to do my bolters and bolt pistols mostly black. I don't like having a lot of silver on them, but I took some German grey from AK and I did all of the edges on here actually, and I did a lot of scratches and a little bit of detail here to break it up. But I'm going to add some silver chips on the end, and that's really going to break up this plain black. But I do like my bolt guns, yeah, pretty much black apart from the barrels and stuff like that. I just think it looks cooler than having lots of silver parts. Pretty much finished now. I want to just do some weathering and finish the metallics at the very end. I think one of the most important things for me, and I say this on basically every Space Marine I paint here on the channel, is the battle damage. And if you've watched my Sons of Horus videos or the last Space Wolf I did actually, it's going to be the same way. I'm going to use the burnt umber that I've used as a wash on the leather parts, but here I use it thick like a normal paint. And I just focus on doing the chips and scratches as small as I can. I think on the final photos they look quite big and it looks maybe a little bit messy, but in the hand I'm pretty confident these are super small and they just add a lot of visual impact, I think. I really focus on wearing out the edges first, especially lower down, and this is just a nice way of replacing your edge highlights by having them worn away. I have to do this in small batches because I have to concentrate quite a lot on doing all these tiny little dots, so I'll do like a little section, maybe take a break or work on something else. But if you start to speed up, get lazy or tired, and the dots become too big, then it just doesn't work. You really want them to be as tiny as you can, and that keeps it in scale. And that's what's so good about the sculpting that Valbjorn's done. So I don't want to ruin that by having some battle damage out of scale. So basically the smaller you can do it and trying to really wear out the edges and not make it even throughout the whole model, that's going to look more realistic. And I finish with my silver metallics, and they were just base coated with Iron Warriors. And what I'm doing now is highlighting with Iron Breaker. So yeah, I keep the metallics simple. You know, when I use metallics, I tend to just let them do the work. And I also added a couple silver chips to the very corners, sparingly on top of the brown that I'd already done. So I used this on the black casing for the bolt pistol. But yeah, just a few of the areas where I had large brown chips, I added a tiny bit of silver. And this really breaks it up. And yeah, I'm really happy with how this leg looks from this side actually. I think it's really busy, it's got lots of detail in, and personally I absolutely love how it looks. Again, I want to make the silver as small as I can. I want to have the brown chip and then the silver even smaller within that. But it's very forgiving because if I make a mistake with the silver, I can just go back with the brown. But I think when you add all these layers, you know, we've got the scratches I did with the grey and the kind of stippling I did when layering, and then we add in the brown chips and then these silver ones, then I think you build up a lot of visual noise and it just has more depth to it, I guess. And yeah, I'm really happy with how much the silver changes the black on the bolt pistol. I think it looked a little bit boring before, but just a few little silver chips and yeah, it's really nice now, I think. And I think I prefer this to painting big areas of the silver, like I said. I added some highlights on the bronze with just adding some light bronze to it. I absolutely love both of those paints from Pro Acryl, and I did like the little turquoise wash. It kind of just subtly matted it down a little bit, broke up the rivets, but now I'm just picking out a few of them with this slightly lighter color. I don't need to go to light bronze on its own. I just want it to be subtly lighter. And yeah, I tend to go simple with metallics. I'll just pick out a few of the edges and details, and that should be enough. I wanted to do the base snow, and I've learnt before to not paint your rocks super detailed, and then just to cover it in snow. So I took some grey and I just added a little bit of brown, a little bit of green, and just basically, yeah, smashed it all over the base. And while it was still wet, I added a little bit of a lighter grey and just smashed that on. And this is very, very haphazard and fast, but I just wanted to get the color right. And what I'll do is I'll add the snow, and then any parts that aren't covered by snow, I can essentially paint properly. So long as there's some variation in color and it is the right color of rocks. So I want it to be gray with a little bit of green in, so it feels more natural. That's all it needs to be at this point. So yeah, I've spent ages on rocks, like absolutely forever, painting them perfectly, and then just covered them with snow. So I knew that that was a waste of time at this point. I quickly airbrushed some black from below just to get some shadows on the rocks, and then I gave it an ultra matte varnish as well, because I really want the rocks to be super matte against whatever snow product I end up using. I think I've got every snow product you can buy. I didn't know which one to use. One of my favorites is this Precision Ice and Snow, and I don't know what's happened, but I think they don't exist anymore maybe. And I was looking in this box for this wash that they do, because it was going to do exactly what I wanted for this base, but I found the bottle and it had dried up, so I was absolutely gutted about that. So I decided to try out some of the AK products. I thought the snow sprinkles looked pretty good, but after trying it and letting it dry, it just isn't quite the look that I'm going for. I kind of did this quickly because I didn't have too much time to experiment with snow in great detail. And this was all about the figure, really, so I didn't need to do some incredible, elaborate snow base. I just wanted to put it in its environment and, get a little bit of snow on it. And here you have the final result. I really needed to paint this model to get me back in the groove after Golden Demon burnout. And yeah, this has definitely got me back on track. I really, really enjoyed it. I love to paint in this way where you're trying and you're putting in lots of detail into every area, but 80%, not 100% meticulous about every tiny bit, because sometimes you just need to paint, and this is definitely the happy medium for me. Not speed painting, not going crazy, spending 300 hours on one figure. This is just great. And I was quite surprised. I put it side by side, the inspiration, and I think I got pretty close. I wasn't trying to match it exactly, just get that feel, the dark grey, the mood, the grittiness. I think that's what I wanted. And these extra details that Valbjorn sculpts, they add so much to the figure, and I hope that this paint job has added to that as well. I hope you picked up some things. Maybe, you can adapt this style to your own, or just enjoyed the video, really. If you did like this video and you want to see more from me, I'm usually on Patreon, and I normally do longer videos like this one. This is probably clocking in at 40 minutes or something like that. And sometimes we're a bit shorter on YouTube. But yeah, if you like these longer format ones where we paint a figure with a lot of detail, then yeah, check out our Patreon. There's plenty on there and plenty more to come. And yeah, of course, check out Valbjorn's as well. Everyone plugs their Patreon, but it's super important. We wouldn't be doing these videos without you guys that support it on there. So thanks for everyone who does. And yeah, leave a comment. Let me know what you think of this model. Let me know what you think of the sculpt, the painting, everything. And I will see you soon for the next video.